Welcome to the 128th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's Podium. For over a century, this platform has been a gathering place for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to discuss the most pressing issues of our time.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Van Biesen, Canadian Club Toronto President and your host for today. After 128 seasons, I'm proud that our club continues to address urgent issues with respected leaders who are committed to transformation. Environmental, social, and governance topics have become corporate priorities thanks to investor and public calls for accountability and transparency. Today's speaker is demanding and advancing solutions to the environmental challenges that threaten our planet. He's using his position and platform to make change in pursuit of a sustainable world, starting with his own company. He's a visionary leader who is walking the talk, and that's why he's here today at Canada's Podium. Our ability to bring you these important discussions is due to the support of our sponsors. Today's event is being generously sponsored by BCG and EY. We appreciate your generosity. We are grateful that the Canadian Bankers Association is our season sponsor again this year and that Air Canada remains our official airline sponsor. We are also proud to share that Canada's Forest Trust Corporation is our smart forest planting partner for the third season in a row. Through this partnership, we've planted and protected 1,250 trees to date, which is estimated to capture over 196,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide throughout their lifetime, which is equivalent to over 1,000 flights between Toronto and Montreal. We are also very proud to welcome students from TMU and George Brown College's Food Study program, and we're really delighted you are here, and we certainly hope that you will have some tough questions for our speaker. Now, before I introduce our speaker, let me share some club business with you. I invite you to visit our website at canadianclub.org. Besides the event and membership information, we've got a great on-demand feature for any events that you have missed. I also encourage you to share information about today's event on your favorite social media platforms. Now, I will be moderating the question and answer portion of today's event, so I hope you will take out a moment to fill out the QA cards shown here on your table. Our team will be collecting them and bringing them up to me, and for those joining remotely, please hit the Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen at the appropriate time. On to our speaker. A businessman, philanthropist, and highly respected Canadian, Michael McCain has dedicated his entire career to the food industry. Michael began his career at McCain Foods in the late 1970s, where he held a variety of roles, including President and Chief Executive Officer of McCain Foods USA. He joined Maple Leaf Foods in 1995 and became CEO of the company in 1998, a position he held until May 2023. Today, Maple Leaf Foods is one of Canada's leading prepared meats and poultry producers, a significant food exporter, and a critical part of our domestic and global food supply. Michael's values-based vision for the company to raise the good in food has revolutionized Maple Leaf Foods. Here are just two examples. Under his leadership, Maple Leaf Foods became the world's first major carbon-neutral food company 5 years ago. Michael also established the Maple Leaf Center for Food Security, a charitable organization dedicated to addressing systemic causes of food insecurity. Outside of these roles, he serves as a director of McCain Capital, he is a member of the Business Council of Canada, and he is a trustee of the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health Foundation. Michael, Canada's podium is yours.
Leadership in my world, it seeks to inspire others to act beyond what they might otherwise do. Compliance, on the other hand, implies there's a level of submissiveness and obedience, which is a failure of leadership. I'd like you to think about that, and I'll come back to it. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy days to be with us here today. The world is on fire. We see the devastating consequences of this every single day, and our grandchildren will bear the brunt if we fail to lead. Your presence here today says that you care, and I thank you for that. Corporate compliance, as we know, is critical to good governance. Yet it rarely achieves material change in and of itself. And I'm here today to speak to that leadership imperative in tackling our climate crisis, but more importantly, what happens when the price of that leadership becomes so high that it imperils the action we need. I'll dive right in. We're seeing at the moment a very dangerous trend, a movement, if you will, that is potentially, or has the potential to undermine climate action in this country and globally. It's driven by a disconnect that replaces science with ideology, which, while sometimes well-intended, as we know, it also has the potential to shut down the leadership in climate action, erode global progress, and undermine our collective future. I'll begin by framing up my remarks with three thoughts that I'd ask you to consider. First, disconnecting science from climate action is dangerous and a growing trend globally, but also right here in Canada. Second, addressing this climate crisis will take multiple interventions and fast. There's no place for purists, there's no place for absolutes, and there's no place for perfectionism. And third, we need to demand smart public policy from governments which clearly achieves its real impact and avoids unintended consequences. Climate change is a deeply important topic for me and all of my colleagues at Maple Leaf Foods, and my perspectives are grounded in years of investment and action. We've been leaders in all aspects of sustainability, including environmental initiatives, for well over a decade. In 2019, we elevated this from a broad collection of strategies to a very purposeful journey for all of those of us at Maple Leaf, galvanized behind a very clear vision to be the most sustainable protein company on Earth. Virtually all of our strategies link in some way to this vision. And one of our proudest accomplishments, amongst many on this journey, was 5 years ago when we became the very first large-scale food company in the world to be carbon neutral. Not sometime far off in the future, but now. We've simultaneously committed to shared value creation, which means that we take a multi-stakeholder lens on our business. We seek to create value in balance for all of our stakeholders, including the animals in our care and the environment, while also embracing the need for a healthy business. In doing so, we reject the primacy of shareholders in our decision-making. We maintain a long-term horizon, and we're willing to advocate on matters that are important to society, not just our narrow corporate interests. Finally, we are unabashed, simply unabashed in actively seeking to connect these defining features of our company, culture, and our vision to our financial success over time. This includes communicating them as distinctive points of difference that build reputation and affiliation with our company and our products, so we don't force that existential trade-off between virtue and money. This is the essence of shared value creation, which embeds sustainability into the lifeblood of the business and separates it from conventional ESG. The work we do is even more urgent today than it was when we started this journey. The recent UN emissions gap report makes it very clear that globally, we are now on track to blow past the Paris targets. And the consequences of this failure at scale are all around us, from our own record-breaking wildfire season last year to the devastating floods in the southeastern United States and Spain last month. Because this is all true, the potential disconnect of science from climate discourse and public policy and substituting ideology in its place is likely our single biggest threat as an organization. Science, of course, provides the basis for rational action, for policies and regulations that can be broadly endorsed, which ideology simply cannot do. Of course, this threat is increasingly a topic of heated discussion around management and board tables. You'd expect the people, the consumers, to be more worried about climate crisis today, given what's going on around us, and more prone to make buying decisions around sustainability claims, but they're not. In this inflationary environment, they are cost-focused. However, sustainability has never really been a leading purchase motivator. In research we commissioned this year and consistent with other polling data, only 36% of Canadians were very concerned about the climate crisis, down from 45% a year ago. Beyond price considerations, consumers are becoming jaded by sweeping and sometimes indefensible claims, making it increasingly difficult to gain credit in the marketplace for legitimate points of difference and material investments that support them. Companies like my own are struggling to keep up with ever-changing sustainability measurement and reporting standards with no regulatory stability or certainty. And even more worryingly, legislation is ramping up around the world that increasingly penalizes companies for their environmental claims. In this environment where leadership is punished and compliance is actually rewarded, not surprisingly, businesses are quietly deprioritizing and downplaying their sustainability commitments and actions. Let's face it, if fewer people care, and if legal, regulatory, and reputational risk is increasing, why bother? Well, I'll tell you why. Because none of us, especially those of us leading businesses, can shirk our responsibility to do more, faster, better, if we're to reverse the course of this climate crisis. We have to bother, and we have to care. Because we can't thrive in an increasingly perilous, unpredictable world as it is today. Clearly, government has an essential role in setting broad environmental goals, policies, and regulations. Government must also protect consumer interests by ensuring corporate and product claims are truthful and transparent to curb so-called greenwashing. In its most egregious form, this requires a deep understanding of science and recognition of the evolving and often contradictory state of sustainability pathways and measurement, which, for example, has led to a fundamental disagreement in many parts of the world over how carbon management strategy should unfold and the tools available. In this context, science must prevail, and we need to reward leadership, not punish it. This brings us to greenhushing, the unintended consequence of an overzealous approach to policing sustainability. Greenhushing is the negative result of overreaching, restrictive policy or penalizing how companies communicate their commitments and their actions to advance sustainability. We're on that path right now. Greenhushing is now a widespread phenomenon, not just here, but globally. Some data suggests that around 70% of sustainability-minded companies around the world are intentionally shying away from communicating their climate goals, while many others have decided to walk away completely. They're taking this very counterintuitive step to comply with new, seemingly well-intended, but far overreaching, and often ill-informed regulation. Remember, just a few years ago, companies around the world across all industries were making very public pledges to dramatically reduce or eliminate their carbon footprint. Dialing back their advocacy almost universally means dialing back their action. Of course, greenwashing is a real issue, and we well understand that. It robs earnest effort of their credibility and impact. It discredits good actors and fuels public mistrust. But the greater risk, the absolute greater risk, is greenhushing, which at best stifles and at worst suppresses serious efforts to make progress in driving sustainability initiatives. Greenhushing shrinks leadership into mere compliance. One of the most visible examples of the disconnect between science and climate internationally is walking back the role of carbon offsets in carbon management strategies and associated claims attached to outcomes for carbon offsets. World-renowned climate scientists like Dr. Katharine Hayhoe describe our climate challenges using this very simple metaphor. Think of the atmosphere like your backyard swimming pool, where the water level in the pool is the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. There's a hose, think emissions, putting more water in the pool. And the drain, think sequestration, taking water out of the pool. Over time, the water level's been rising faster and faster as we've continued to turn up the hose. So as Dr. Hayhoe describes it, our future has to be a combination of materially reducing or turning off the hose, increasing the size of the drain, and learning how to swim because the water level's already over our heads in many areas. Clearly, the offset market, which is the best representation of the drain, has earned its reputation as the Wild West. Of course, in a nascent field, there have been integrity challenges. We know that. Yet using that simple metaphor, planet Earth cares little about the hose or the drain. It is only impacted by the water level. However, check out the emotion in this topic attached to the debate on the matter this past spring. It culminated in the resignation of the Chief Executive Officer of the Science Based Target Initiative as they attempted to embrace the scientifically sound and legitimate tool as an integral part of a robust and urgent approach to our global problem. Ideological purists seem to ignore the science, arguing instead that all carbon reduction has to occur within the emitter's own value chain or not be considered at all. The rational answer, of course, is that we need both to continually reduce our own emissions, turning off the hose, while using offsets to achieve broader reductions, now increasing the drain. Of course, we need to solve for bad actors in the offset market. Of course we need to do that. And we need to create a science-based approach in the industry, but for certain, this should not diminish their role. We can't afford to throw out a powerful solution just because it's been misused, and the better answer is fix it. Another example, an immediate example, is the desire for many in the climate science world to find ways of, quote, raising the bar. They're raising the bar actually in the middle of the jump. The Science-Based Target Initiative, again, which lines up a company's carbon reduction targets to support the Paris Agreement goal of under 2 degrees global warming, sets an extremely high bar in the first instance for businesses to reduce their carbon footprint and make related claims. Only now the bars just got higher, requiring a completely revised greenhouse gas reduction methodology for all companies, including those who have targets already in place. The new targets that result are significantly more aggressive, as over 60% reductions in just 10 years are required and vastly more complicated. Now, we fully embrace the idea of raising the bar, but it has to be done without disincenting those who are committed, working really hard, but struggling to meet the standards that already exist and were originally established. Maybe a better path to incent leadership might be simply to create a new race rather than moving the finish line in the old one. These are global examples, but the same shift is occurring right here in our backyard, right here in Canada. The most recent is a new piece of legislation in Ottawa, which, although well-intended as the, quote, anti-greenwashing bill, has unintended consequences that are full-on greenhushing. Bill C-59. Bill C-59, passed this past July, is simply put, bad public policy. On first blush, adding stricter rules around greenwashing sounds like a terrific idea. What a great idea. Holding companies accountable for their bold sustainability and environmental claims and making sure that there are consequences to that. What a great idea. But it's rife with uncertainty and risk, including vague and ambiguous references to the ever-evolving landscape of, quote, internationally recognized methodologies, which, quite frankly, often don't exist, and a lack of clarity on what constitutes adequate and proper testing or how it even should be applied. In short, it holds companies to a standard and a framework that doesn't exist in the climate field today. Despite the vague nature of the requirements, there are serious consequences, including rights for private or legal action and material financial penalties of up to $10 million or 3% of a company's revenues. This legislation shifts the onus on companies to prove that their environmental statements are not misleading and invites claims, that it actually invites claims, where the only test to get standing is public interest based on the plaintiff's subjective reasoning and not actual damages or impact. The reputational and the financial risk that this conjures up is acute, as it opens a door to the most frivolous objections, including those advancing interests or an ideological agenda. Some might argue that we should wait for formal guidelines to be published, hopefully by next summer. No. There's no amount of guidance or guidelines which can compensate for what is simply bad policy and the enormity of risk it poses to leadership on climate action that is urgently needed. The chilling effect this has on companies attempting to lead is acute. And we're already seeing those strong signs of greenhushing amongst our peers in the North American food sector, who are actually pulling back on their initiatives. removing any reference to sustainability commitments from their websites, financial statements, and marketing materials, and simultaneously scaling back their initiatives and engagement to address the challenges we face. And we know for certain that many more are making plans as we speak to do the same. I can assure all of our stakeholders, all of them, that without the ability to actively communicate the progressive things that we do at Maple Leaf Foods in the face of undue legal, reputational, or bureaucratic risk, we simply will not do those things. Greenhushing shrinks leadership into mere compliance. If the primary objective is engaging the corporate world to be part of the climate solution and not part of the problem, Bill C-59 will have exactly the opposite effect. Of course, making false and misleading claims is flat out wrong. What is needed is public policy that establishes actual clear support for business to advance their sustainability commitments in a credible and transparent way, finding pathways to incent leadership and progress even in the absence of perfection, and avoiding the unintended consequence of greenhushing. So what are the takeaways and insights for us to consider here today? Number one, our climate crisis is accelerating, and even though most consumers are not particularly moved for understandable reasons, we need to be. Second, disconnecting science from climate action is dangerous and a growing trend. Science, not ideology, must be the guiding light. Third, embracing leadership is more important than penalizing bad actors, lest we reward compliance over investment and action. There's no place for purists, absolutes, and perfectionism. We have to move too quickly for that. Number four, we urgently need to fix problems like bad actors in carbon offsets or egregious greenwashing to restore confidence, but we have to do so avoiding the unintended consequence of greenhushing. The Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market is an excellent example of that kind of controls that are needed. Bill C-59 should frankly be repealed, and a consultative process that leads to sound public policy established. Let me leave you with a very simple message. We're not going to win this climate battle with whispers. We need to be shouting, yelling, roaring. Companies that lead need to be handed a bullhorn, not a muzzle. We face a climate crisis and we need action. Canada needs more climate leadership. The world needs more climate leadership. And it's the future, our children's future, our grandchildren's future that's at stake. And the science is clear. It's very clear. Every action matters. Every voice matters. Every decision matters. Every year matters. Every choice matters. So let's embrace the challenge with urgency, some good science, and some really good goddamn common sense. So.
Thank you. I've been given questions, I've prepared questions, but I'm going to put those aside.
Oh my goodness.
Just for a minute. What brought you to this place?
Well, it's a long story, and we don't have a long time. So I'd say it's a combination of the intersection between our belief system, because we believe in this passionately. All of my colleagues and in the organization that I've spent most of my adult life with, we believe in it quite passionately. But we found the intersection between what we believe in and strategy for distinctiveness in our industry. So we brought those two things together, and one of my favorite illustrations of that is a Japanese concept that I think they refer to it as ikigai, which is finding your place of the intersection between what you believe in, what you love, what you're good at, what you're good at, and what you can get paid for. And I think we found that place.
So when you are standing among a group of business leaders, Canadian CEOs, are you a lone wolf? Are
No,
you like
definitely
a
not.
lone voice, or?
Oh, definitely not. No.
So
There are many very passionate people that are standing up, taking leadership roles. I think my fear is, seeing those people dial back their passion and their advocacy and therefore their action. But no, definitely not alone. I think you fear in the world where where's the belly of the curve, the large majority. I think we need more voices at the table.
Okay.
But it is definitely not alone. There are many others that feel very, very comparably.
Okay. You talked about disconnecting science from climate, and that is obviously a very dangerous thing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What are you seeing, and what instances are you seeing that? Just bring that to life.
Well, I referred to some of the bigger examples now. I think the global debate around the role of offsets, right? The drain as opposed to the hose is certainly one of the most relevant near-term examples. Bill C-59 in Canada is just outright dangerous in terms of what it'll do to leadership, and you don't hear many voices of that in our industry, because the majority of the industry are in that very safe harbor of compliance. So it's not a risk to them. It's only a risk to those that are trying to demonstrate leadership in climate activity and climate action. The ideology that it gets placed with, and I'm not judging some of those ideologies. I'm judging the role that it plays in climate action, in influencing science. I'm not judging the ideology by itself. When I say things like, in my business, which happens to be dominantly animal protein, there are many people in the world for their own reasons, and I'm not judging their reasons, but they would say one animal processed for food is one too many. So the goal is actually not about what you do, it's about that you don't exist. There's ideologies that say 1 barrel of oil out of the ground is one too many today.
Right.
And what you do as a fossil fuel company is just like we don't care about what you do. We just want you not to exist.
Right.
And those types of influences. When you ask people in the debate that was raging over the course of the summer on carbon offsets, mostly in Europe, and when you talk to some of the scientific community, you say, well, so what is your opposition to a well-structured, validated offset? And they'll start with words like trust. And I appreciate trust matters. But what the hell does that have to do with the science, right? That's not a rational scientific concern. I don't trust that's a solvable problem. But so those are, and oftentimes the core of their reason or the rationale is ideologically based, not scientifically based.
So is that why we're getting the legislation wrong? Let's take Bill C-59. Why are we getting it wrong?
Well, I think, why are we getting it wrong? I'm interested in good public policy. I'm not a legislator, and in this particular instance, Kathleen could describe very, very eloquently how this legislation arrived as a private member's bill at 12 o'clock at night in a very rushed manner without due consideration. I think our demands for good public policy should be to understand that the public policy achieves its objectives, but also understands the second, third, fourth order impacts of the unintended consequences. In this case, the unintended consequences dwarf the decent intentions. They dwarf them, and they just didn't give they weren't given the consideration.
But if I take you back, Michael, to the ideology comment, are we overly influenced by the ideology? Is that what is leading some of this legislation in the wrong direction, or is it a lack of consultation with scientists, or some combination of the two? Or
I think in certain instances, I would say the answer to that's yes. The role of carbon offsets, I think, is a good example. The idea that the Science-Based Target Initiative is, raising the bar in the middle of the jump as opposed to creating a new race is just awful. And I think to some degree there's elements of that built into it. There's an element of perfectionism that is sort of the sistership of ideology that's attached to that. I can't say because I wasn't in the halls of legislation whether Bill C-59 that arrived the way it did was ideologically motivated or just plain old poorly thought out policy. I don't know, but I do know that it gets. I do know that it gets. You speak to many that say, well, I don't trust corporate Canada or I don't trust corporate America to do the right thing, and so we should shut them down. Right? And it's just such a dangerous trend.
I don't know if someone is timing us, but there's probably a poll on how long it would take us in this conversation to get to the U.S. election, so that time is now. With the recent U.S. election, this is a question from the crowd. So with the recent results in the U.S., how can we continue to address climate change effectively and not get discouraged?
Those are two parts to that question.
You can take whichever part.
One is factual, the other is emotional. It's easy to get discouraged because we can all imagine what they may do. It's a collision between very narcissistic kind of near-term interests as opposed to caring for what's going to happen to the future for our children and grandchildren. One of the things that Dr. Catherine Hayhoe cites often is that people misunderstand that climate crisis is about protecting planet Earth. It's not. It's about protecting humanity, right? Planet Earth's going to be fine, right? It's going to be just fine. Humanity might not. And that future is, I now have 8 grandchildren, 3 more on the way, and I care about what impact them. So in the United States, in the U.S. election, of course it's discouraging, and I think we're all kind of processing what that means, and I don't know the answer to that. I know the media would report that they're going to imminently pull out of the Paris Accord again, and that's obviously troubling, short-sighted, unscientific, and not recognizing the crisis at hand. What do we do around that to kind of maintain our progress? The one thing I hope we don't do is give up. But I can't, I think it's too early to figure that out yet, how that looks. The discouraging part of it, buck up.
Yeah. It's a great question that whoever shared that, because I think it brings to mind another question, which is a lot of people would say, we are Canada, we're small. I mean, we've got a big energy industry, of course, but we're small relative to other countries who need to be making change, who are perhaps not pulling their weight. So why should we spend all these ergs of energy doing this? How much difference is it really going to make?
Well, I've said often that while we advocate leadership, over compliance, you're always in this space. You're always threading a needle. And the other needle that needs to be thread here is there's a fine line between leadership and martyrdom, right? And, Canada has, we just simply can't solve this, on our own, can't. So we have to pull along, the rest of the world with us because it's a global problem. And we have to pull along or participate or find allies in some sort of a way. But, if the rest of the world was said, you know what, we don't give a shit about this and we're just going to move on, let the planet burn and to hell with the future generations. We're just going to make a lot more money today. If that's where the global center of gravity became, for Canada to stand up with a flag and say, well, not us, that's martyrdom. And, we have to make sure that we strike that balance as well. But I don't think it'll get to that. I honestly don't think it'll get to that. I think there will be enough smart people, enough caring people, enough people who think forward long enough around the world that can pull the center of gravity of this issue along with it. in spite of the U.S. tendencies. I hope.
Not just the U.S. Not just
It's
the
not
US.
just the U.S. No, it's not just the U.S.
Let me ask you some consumer-driven questions. So you referenced in your remarks that the consumer interest or around this topic is declining. Talk about that. You're in a consumer-driven business. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is? What's happening?
Well, it is in the sense that there's lots of dialogue around, the consumer's interest in climate. I don't think the leadership in either the commercial world or government have done a great job of communicating, the climate crisis to the population. Even labels matter. Even the word climate or carbon tax, is probably inappropriate in the moment. Garbage collection fee might be a better word, but. When we started down this journey to be carbon neutral in 2019, I remember at that time, our consumer research team from the marketing function, they run into my office and they say, Houston, we have a problem. What's the problem? Well, I just need you to know that consumers don't care. And we're going to do this, and we're going to put it on the front page of our package, and we're going to put it in and say, consumers aren't motivated by this. They're not motivated. It's on the list, but it's like down the list, like number 6 or something, like 6 or 7 or 8, a distant 6 or 7 or 8. Even in the plant-based business, even consumers in the plant-based space, it was not a driving motivator. And that was 2019. It's not gotten better. In fact, in the last year, it got worse through food inflation and other issues. So, understanding, we've spoken often about the role of short-termism. It exists in business, it exists in government, but it also exists in some cases in the consumer's mind.
Yeah.
And, it's not the here and the now, and a lot of consumerism is about the here and the now. And I think one of the reasons why we took the step that we did, kind of in connection to our belief system, is the Wayne Gretzky effect of where's the puck going, not where is it, and we felt that was going to increase. Sadly, it hasn't this year. But if you take a long-term view, I would hope that it would materialize. But I've said often in my discussions in Ottawa and other parts of the world, and with commercial leaders in Canada, business leaders, is that it's really our job to own how the consumer feels about this. It's our job to own that collectively. And I think we've really sort of failed them in not communicating it in terms that are accessible and digestible for them and their futures.
Question from a friend of yours. What are the 3 things you would tell a CEO to do first as they begin their determined journey to zero carbon?
Tell me that again, please.
What are the 3 things you would tell a CEO to do first as they begin their determined journey to zero carbon?
The 3 things they would do. The single most important thing to do is to, I think, is to get alignment with all your stakeholders and get the stakeholders, lined up. I happen to have a bit of a little bit of an edge in that one because my family has a controlling interest in the company that we're taking this position in. So that helps, makes it easier, right? So we don't have to worry about some of the risks that exist in many corporate boardrooms. So we can take a longer term horizon attached to this. And that idea of a long horizon really matters. But I'd say get alignment to the stakeholders, number 1. Number 2 is figuring out how to balance all of these interests in a way that starts with monetizing your investment in, like we're pretty unabashed in doing our level best to monetize this as a point of distinction in the marketplace. It's easier for us to do because we're smaller than, say, in the North American basis, not so much in Canada, but in the North American basis. It's easier for us to do, but we're working hard to monetize it. I think one of the things that we embraced in that journey of balance and monetizing it is our shareholders, which is the most common question. How do you get your shareholders to agree to that? We spend tens of millions of dollars on maintaining our carbon neutral status. One thing I've learned about shareholders over the last, in a public company, prior experience in a private company, is that shareholders by and large are not really that enamored with maximizing their interest. They're more interested in you meeting their expectations. So the idea of meeting expectations versus maximizing interest is a really critical point in this journey because the challenge for us then is we need to do that without failing to meet these legitimate expectations of a shareholder or other stakeholder. And I think we've found the path to be able to do that, to be able to do both, not or. We've described it in the terms of not succumbing to the tyranny of the word or. It's the magic of the word and. We need to do this and meet the shareholders' expectations. If we meet their expectations, yeah, but if you weren't carbon neutral, you could have been $10 million or $20 million more. They don't really care about that, as long as you meet their expectations. So stakeholders finding the path to balance all of those interests, including monetizing it, I think would be the second piece of advice. And then the execution is obviously, challenging. We are an executionally minded culture, and I think building out the executional framework so it's not a poster on the wall, so you're really doing it, makes huge difference. Those would be the three things I'd say.
Now, you asked us to roar, not whisper, so I will give the last nod to a TMU student whose question is, what can a student do? What can they and their peers do to advance this agenda?
I would say organize. You need a chorus of voices, not a single voice. So I would say, figure out how you can organize a chorus of voices. If consumers don't care today, if the young voices, if there was a chorus of young voices, maybe they'd care a little more. And so the advice I'd give to anybody would say, don't try and do it on your own, organize.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I want to thank you for sharing your vision, your advocacy on this seminal issue of our time, which is environmental sustainability and, as you said, the future of the human race. We appreciate every day at this podium an honest critique, so we appreciated very much your critique of the issues that threaten progress on climate action, shining a light on issues like greenwashing, greenhushing, and the potential impacts of Bill C-59 are important for us to understand so that our awareness is heightened. Complacency is clearly not an option. We all need to be loud and active and roar, as you say, as you and Maple Leaf Foods have done, if we are going to address these existential threats. So thank you again for providing somewhat of a roadmap for all of us to get there. Now, before we close, I want to invite our audiences to join us on Thursday of this week for the leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, Jagmeet Singh. He will be here at the podium, and then the following day, Friday, we will be joined by the Honourable Mark Miller, Federal Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. And next week, on Friday, we welcome the Honourable Caroline Mulroney, President of the Treasury Board of Ontario and Minister of Francophone Affairs. And on December 4th, we will welcome the CEO of Emera, Scott Balfour. Please visit our website, again, canadianclub.org, for more information. One more round to BCG and EY for your support for our event today. Lastly, I would like to thank our AV supplier, VVC Live, for facilitating today's event. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and we hope to see you again soon.